Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining us on a Friday afternoon. We love doing these little hot seat coaching sessions. It's just so much fun. Really excited to talk today about building powerful fundraising partnerships with your board and staff. So my name is Sandra Davis, and my pronouns are she and her. I am the founder and president of Donorly, and Donorly works with small and mid-sized nonprofits at moments of growth and change to build their fundraising muscle using donor research, storytelling, and community building. So before I started the company, I was an in-house fundraiser for a number of nonprofit arts organizations, and I really honed my experience with fundraising and board management, but it was definitely a learning on the job kind of career. So I feel like I've seen a lot, and there's always more to learn. Definitely have had a lot of experience working with staff and board and those relationships, which are both joyful and complicated, with the organizations I worked with and with our clients. In the end, it's all about identifying the strengths of your board, cultivating those one-on-one relationships. I feel like I talk about that 10 times a day, and then finding those opportunities for everyone to contribute in a meaningful way. So I'm really pleased to be joined today by fellow consultant Barbara Gross, who has a deep experience and knowledge in this area. She is going to help us make sure we're approaching these relationships with intention and impact. Now, Barbara, I want to give you a minute to tell us a little bit about you.
Sure. Thank you so much, Sandra. And I'm really thrilled to be here. I hope wherever you all are is as beautiful as it is today here in the Boston area. My name is Barbara Gross, and my pronouns are she and her. And exactly 10 years ago, I founded BDG Consulting. And I love the word joy that you referenced before, Sandra, because it was time for me to find some new joy in my development career, which has been extraordinarily rewarding. I spent several decades on the front lines with some of the leading institutions here in Boston, mostly in higher ed and secondary ed, Wellesley College, Babson, Phillips Academy in Andover, and Beth Israel Deaconess Medical Center, to name the major ones. And through this experience, I had the opportunity to develop significant donor relationships in the US and globally, and establish major and principal giving programs, targeted campaigns within each of these institutions, create unique high-level volunteer programs, and advise institutional leadership. 10 years ago, I decided to kind of take that experience and channel it into a consulting practice, which I sort of backed into because I actually thought I was going to do philanthropic advising, but then somebody asked me to do a fundraising consulting engagement, and I took it on, and sort of that's kind of where my career led for its next chapter. I leveraged all of the experience, and I continue to this day, including the prior 10 years prior to development. I was in the advertising and PR world. And so I draw on all of that all the time. And sometimes I think, how did I get to this? How did I arrive at this decision? Or how do I solve problems this way? And sometimes it goes all the way back. I won't even tell you the year, but it goes all the way back to that early experience in the marketing and advertising world when I was focused on coming up with marketing strategies for Honey Nut Cheerios. And I still eat them to this day, including this morning. But all of this experience really helped give me the background that I've needed as a consultant to provide the critical thinking, objectivity, and perspective needed to support my clients, to help them be successful in in creating sustainable development programs and supporting both targeted and comprehensive campaigns. So that's me, and thank you again, Sandra, and your team for including me today.
Oh, I'm so excited about this. And I didn't know about the Honey Nut Cheerios. Believe me, I've eaten a few of them in my time too. So whatever you did to inspire that, awesome.
That is a sustainable product, I must say.
Exactly. Okay, we're ready to get started. So as a reminder, this call is being recorded, And if you'd like to turn on closed captioning, just navigate to the meeting controls toolbar and click on the show captions. We've selected a series of questions that were submitted in advance, and we're going to try to spend about 10 minutes on each, but we'll call you up to come on off mic and on camera to state your question and just introduce yourself, your name, pronouns, title, organization, and state your question. And if you didn't have time to submit a question in advance, please go ahead and put it in the chat. Izzy Weiner is here today to help us kind of MC the process here. So she'll be watching the chat and looking out for those questions. We encourage you to just get involved in the conversation in the chat. Let's make this a really useful, fun, engaging conversation. So with that, Izzy, let's take our first question.
Great. Good afternoon, everyone. It's exciting to be here. Always exciting also to hear from Barbara and Sandra, though we work, quite closely all about the ins and outs of what brings everyone here today. So to get things started, we have a wonderful question from Dan, who I see on the Zoom. I'm going to let you come off mic and share your question, but just for a little bit of broader context and as a reminder, you're specifically asking about constructing and engaging a board fundraising committee. So we'd love to hear a bit more from you and what brings your question forward to the hot seat.
Hello, can everyone hear me? Great. Hi, everyone. My name is Dan Balkin. I'm the development director at Ars Nova Theater in New York City. I was asking about the board fundraising or development committee. I've had, ranging success activating this kind of group at numerous organizations over the years. So I guess I'm wondering if you've come across or if you have ideas about ways to structure or methods of engagement or ways of creating goal structures for this group to move them from what can often end up being oversight and review and just sort of, reading out the kind of work that you're doing. And instead moving them toward peer-to-peer ambassadors for their fellow board members and activating their networks, something so that it feels like they have both ownership and it's their job to move these pieces forward, and understanding that we all know that that's going to be a more effective kind of role for them to play rather than us just feeding them language and feeding them materials. So anything that's sort of structural or just ways of kind of imagining that community and how to make that the more successful.
Sandra, do you want me to jump in?
Go ahead, Barbara. Yes.
Well, Dan, this is just a great question to start off this conversation. And I want to say, one of the things in consulting with one of my clients, this is really, the way I like to describe this as sort of one of the silver linings of COVID. I know that those of you in the theater world may not see a lot of silver linings coming out of COVID, but let's just say from the development standpoint, I think to some extent it really gave us an opportunity to just shake things up and just I don't want to say blow things up, but definitely look at our structures and our traditional ways of doing things with fresh eyes. We had new technology, people's lives are being organized in a different way. So let me say, for starters, I did this with one client where I just said, you know what, they had a development team of 2, and basically they were spending a lot, the development director was spending a lot of time scheduling these development committee meetings. What a waste of time. And so I really advocated, after talking with some other of my professional colleagues in the, who consult to boards specifically, I said, do you have to have a development committee? I mean, does it have to be a committee? And they was like, no, not really. And I said, well, what about taking each member of this committee? I mean, every board member has to have a committee assignment, so let's not blow up that construct. But every board member is all the board members who are on the development committee. And what I really advocated and what I actually implemented for this one particular client is to sit down individually with each member of the committee and come up with an agreement, a work plan that says this is what so that the board member is saying, this is where I feel my strengths are. This is where I feel I can make the greatest contribution. And also this is my time commitment. This is what I'm able to do. And let me just sort of back up a second. And I know I've seen some of the questions that we're going to address, so you may hear me repeat things more than once, which also isn't a bad thing for brains to have information sink in. Number one, when you're thinking of a development committee, come up with a job description. If you haven't done that already, a one-pager, what are the expectations of somebody being on this committee? You know, what's the purpose of it? Who are the people who are on it? What's the skill set that you're looking for? And it typically falls to the bottom, but it is one of the most important aspects is what is the time commitment? And so I guess, you know, bottom line, I would say, you know, I am an advocate of really working one-on-one with committee members. Yes, you can call them a committee. And maybe once a quarter or a few times a year in advance of a board meeting, you can meet with the committee as a whole. But I certainly experience, and I'm sure, you know, Dan, you might experience this, others might experience this, where you finally, you know, you've spent whatever, 3 or 4 hours on your doodle poll, just getting everybody to find a time. And then you get in a time that everybody agrees to and half the people show up. And then you have to go do the meeting 2 or 3 times anyway. I mean, that is just 2 or 3 times afterwards. I think it's a big waste of time. And everybody has different strengths that they bring. But I do think it's very important to have that one-on-one conversation. And I think people like to be held accountable. They like to know what they're being expected to do. And I think to some extent, it's kind of easier on a big committee to kind of, you know, particularly if your meetings are on Zoom, to sort of sit in the background and not say anything. But I think it conveys a sense of seriousness, a sense of importance. I will also say, and this is probably something I'm going to say more than once today, which is if you're a small organization, everyone on your board is part of the fundraising committee. Okay, this is not something that gets cooked up around a table or around a Zoom screen on the side and others don't participate in it. You'll hear me say more than once today, development is a team sport, and everyone on your board plays a role. Number one, with giving. And that's just expectation as a board member. And then as you sort of refine it further, some people can be really big donors. Some people are really good at engaging others. And some people could be really good at stewardship. And so I think it really behooves the development director, perhaps working with an executive director, to really identify how each member of the board, and this will start to feed into some of these other questions, how each member of the board can play a role. But let me just sort of sum up by saying, Dan, I think big committees, you know, serve a purpose because there's a sense of synergy within them. But in terms of really getting the work done, I think that's something that can and should be done, can be done more effectively and should be done more and should be done on a one-on-one basis. Particularly for a small organization where you're juggling and wearing multiple hats.
Yeah, for sure. Barbara, that is such great advice. I want to add one thing, Dan, because I think just getting back to your question around them, board members, sometimes treating this like a moment of oversight. I would say when you're thinking about the job description or the design of the committee, make sure there's a specific a definition of what success is for that committee. And it's not, let's raise a lot of money, which is not anything you can be held accountable for, but it might be each board member introduces, X number of new people to the organization. Each board member commits to um, uh, a day of calling and thanking current donors. It could be a variety of things, but very specific tasks that they agree to, and that it's easy to hold them accountable for. And that when you're at the end of the year, you can say, look, this is how we define success, and look, we achieved it. And these are the results: more money, more new donors, whatever it is.
But that contract, I mean, I think just to build on what Sandra said, I think that agreement that you have with each member, let's just say those who are on the development committee, around giving, around introductions and connections, around hosting, thanking. I mean, that's going to be a little different for each person. And I know that takes a lot of work, but at the same time, you as the development director are building that working relationship. And those working relationships lead to psychic and emotional and ultimately philanthropic investment in an organization. Because I think what you're really talking about here, Dan, and you may have sort of said it overtly, but somebody said it a little, maybe Sandra, you said it as well. It's about ownership. You as the development director, you don't own the success entirely. I mean, again, it as I have often said in other situations, there are many midwives here, and you can't claim all the success, or if there are things that don't work out, I mean, you can't do it by yourself. And that shouldn't be their expectation.
Was that helpful?
Great. Yeah, very much. Yeah, thank you all.
Awesome.
Great. Well, jumping into the next question, I think it follows along a similar vein of accountability and agreements that are made specifically in relation to the role of a board chair or a development committee chair for that matter. So I want to invite Adam to come off mic and share a little bit more about your question.
Yes, thank you. And it goes hand in hand with everything that was just covered. So appreciate this. Currently in my executive director role, working with two co-presidents, so the cockpit got a little bigger and they're still figuring out their yin and yang, and a second ever fundraising committee chair. So just building on some of the conversation on how the executive director can continue to be a catalyst and some accountability partner for volunteer board members, but really to inspire board leadership to create the structures and the processes so that there's that peer-to-peer accountability. It's really about, I think, the culture piece more than anything. But if it has reflections, would value that.
Curious, Adam, with this organization, is there any formal, agreement with board members about the role itself, about their giving, about the expectations, anything there?
Yes, with no dollar amounts tied to a give or a get.
Yeah, great. But an expectation to do something that's meaningful for them.
Yes, and to give or get without a dollar amount. Yeah.
Okay, great.
Good question.
And are they all doing it? Is the culture such that they agree, that they all agree that they're doing that?
They've all reached the floor, and as far as I'm
Great.
concerned, the ceiling for many of them is still a ways to go.
Okay, that's great. Do you have any questions, Barbara, or do you want to jump in?
On this one,
Yeah.
I 100% agree with you, Adam, on the give or get policy. The way I like to position it and have advised my clients is because everybody has a different calibration on this, is if somebody's going to be on a board in that conversation where you're getting to know somebody and you're potentially recruiting them for your board, I would, number one, be very upfront about expectations. If they don't ask, then they're not that experienced with this kind of thing. But if they don't ask, to engage them in that conversation and really sort of frame it as, board member. We like to have board members involved who are willing to make X organization or institution among their top 3 philanthropic priorities. And, you know, if for someone who, you know, regularly makes 6-figure annual gifts, you certainly don't want to give them a ceiling of $10,000. And for somebody who $1,000 is a major gift, you know, you want to be sensitive, you know, and just do it within a sense of making people, is, you know, Sandra said this at the beginning, you want them to feel good, you want them to feel joy, you want them to feel like they're making a positive contribution, not that they're not measuring up. But just further to sort of just, you know, kind of flesh that out a little bit more, just go back to what I said before, which is best practices. I think it's very important. Number one, in terms of job descriptions, probably this is obvious, but there should be a job description about what it means to be a board member on whatever organization you're talking about. Okay, what are the expectations? A 1-pager explaining what that is. I would also strongly advocate a board handbook that is that, you know, has this job description, describes the different committees, and is sort of an FAQ for the organization should they want to refer to it. And I think also it gives them an opportunity, you know, little blurbs, little bios about their fellow board members, so that they're able to know, you know, who are these people, and sort of get to know them and develop that sort of esprit de corps, but also that sense of shared ownership. And then, you know, frankly, I think this idea of an agreement or a contract, or however you want to, you know, describe it, is also really important. And I don't see a lot of places doing this, but I really, because it takes time. But I think as the board chair or the development committee chair or the, you know, committee on, you know, trustees or whoever you're nominating chair, that really on an annual, maybe 1 to 12 to 18 month basis, that there be a sit down with each board member to say, how is this working for you? How's this going? You know, these are the things this is why you wanted to be on the board. This is what we talked about. Are we actually, you know, are we measuring up? What else can we do? What else are you looking to do, et cetera? But that sense of checking in and communicating, I think, it's a very important element of having engaged board members.
Thank you.
Barbara, I would just say, oh, Adam.
I don't know, just a clarifying question there. This was so helpful, and I don't want to take other people's mic time. In those kinds of 12 to 18 months check-in, is there value to not having the professional staff leader in those conversations and really letting volunteer board members, peers? Okay, thank you.
That would be, again, that's why I say, you know, actually, Dan, you said it before. You mentioned something and I jotted it down just so I wouldn't forget. You know, we also have to be respectful, and we also don't want board members to think this is their job. We as professionals, this is our job, and we want them, you know, we want to engage them as partners, but presumably they don't have time to make it their job. And we don't need them to make them, because we're the professionals, and we need, you know, they have a role to play, we have a role to play. One of the things I talk about a lot, and anybody who's worked with me would roll their eyes, because I always say it's going to be on my headstone, which is, it's the messenger, not the message. And so part of our role as professionals is to understand who are the best messengers. But Dan, Adam, to your point, yeah, I think those conversations about how's this working for you are best done peer to peer.
I would also just add to that, I've seen that done really, really effectively, and it's an opportunity to just look at the data. How many meetings did you attend? You know, how many, if it's a performing arts organization, how many performances did you attend? How many new donors did you bring on? Just look at the raw data, and that's where the staff can come in to gather those things. And one thing, what I've seen that done in practice really, really effectively, is that it gives the board member, the trustee, an opportunity to say, it might be like, wow, I'm really doing more than I thought I was. I didn't think I was stepping up, but actually I'm really, succeeding at this. Or to say, you know what, I'm clearly not giving this the attention it needs, and it may be time for me to think about stepping off. And I think that is a very healthy conversation. And it might be scary to have board members follow, step off if you don't have somebody else in place, but you want to keep your board strong, engaged, really feeling like every board member is stepping up, and that's what keeps a really, really healthy board relationship. So Barbara, thanks for all that great advice. That was awesome.
Yeah, it's one of the other things, I mean, this is not so much about accountability, but it's about that synergy around the board table or the board Zoom room. One of the things that I have seen done, and this doesn't cost anybody any money, but it's a really interesting exercise. And as I think about it, the last time I did it, it was advising a client as they were establishing a new development committee. And we went, and this was pre-COVID. So we were all, I mean, and we're all back in our offices and et cetera now anyway, but I'm just thinking as we all do pre-COVID, post-COVID. And I remember we were sitting in the I was sitting with this development committee in the executive director's office. And I said to the committee, before we get started, I'd really like to go around the room and just hear from each person why they wanted to be on this board. What does this organization mean to you? And it was absolutely, I mean, jaw-dropping. I mean, people said things that it's like you expected a certain person to say one thing, but instead somebody else said it. And basically what they're doing, because your development committee, let's just talk about the development committee, they are your lead ambassadors and advocates and potentially askers, okay? So what they're doing when they're going around that table, they're doing two things. Number one, they're talking emotionally, intellectually, why this institution or organization means so much to them. So there's a self-cultivation going on there. And they're hearing it from other people. So there's just this there's just a synergy, and it's and there's a bonding thing that goes on too. So I just in terms of a best practice, that's not about accountability, but it is about just how you sort of bond and gel this group.
I love that, Barbara. I think sometimes from the lens of being a staff member, an executive director, a director of development, you imagine that each board member knows each other as well as you maybe know them. And it's not necessarily the case. And I think a lot of times board members that have been on the board for a long time, have some kind of unwritten, unspoken ways to communicate and act. And people who are new on the board are not aware of those things. They're not aware of the history of some of the long-term board members. And so to give that storytelling opportunity is so important. And you're so right in terms of, I've seen that happen in action in terms of helping people build those bonds. There's nothing more powerful than storytelling, and it's worth every minute in a board meeting or a committee meeting you can spend on it.
Absolutely.
All right, Izzy, what else have you got for us?
Great. Well, with all of that said, I think we want to move into now a pretty actionable question about bringing the board and staff together around a specific fundraising campaign. So Irv, I would love if you would consider coming off mic, sharing a little bit more about your question, and especially the context, which seems like a big and exciting one of embarking on a large fundraising campaign that gathers the board and staff and everyone together to make that project possible and reach your goal.
Yeah, thank you, Izzy. I'm Irv Robinson. I'm co-president of the Musar Institute, which is a Jewish spiritual practice, the national board for promoting that throughout many parts of the world. So our kind of situation is we have a normal annual campaign like a lot of nonprofits, but so on top of that, or in conjunction with it, we're still working that out. We are embarking upon a major, what might be thought of as a capital campaign, although this has nothing to do with buildings or anything like that. It has to do with programming and adding some positions to accomplish certain things. And we don't do this. We've done it one other time in our history, so we don't normally do this. And we don't have a great culture around fundraising. Like we don't have a development director. We're a pretty small organization, 8 or 9 people on the staff. So you answered the question and already been asked, but our answered, excuse me. But I think our challenge is how to bring the board, the staff, and people outside the board even to have the passion and wherewithal to see something which is large for us through, and maybe to build some structures or systems that might support that.
Oh, great question, Irv. Thank you. One of the things I want to say about this is that, and Barbara, feel free to jump in. There is a lot of times I get questions from potential clients or current clients about board participation in fundraising, and the shorthand for fundraising is often just asking. And there's so much more to fundraising than asking, as you know. There's cultivating those relationships, there is thanking, there's stewarding those relationships, there's being that ambassador. And the majority of the work is really in that lane. The asking is a small percentage of it. And not everybody on your board or your staff are the folks who should be doing the asking. It's a pretty specific skill. And so, I think one of the things to think about is who are the folks on your board and staff who would be amazing askers, amazing closers, the ones who can really, inspire that giving, and who are the people who would enjoy thanking, who are the people who would enjoy bringing people in or deepening those relationships with people who are already there. And you talked about structure, and there's lots of structure you can put around all of those things, and I would strongly recommend it. But I think that's maybe some kind of an assessment of who the players are, who the folks are that you'd want to participate. And then you can put a structure around that. We can talk a little bit more about that. But Barbara, would love to hear your thoughts on this question as well.
Underscore everything you already said, Sandra. And, and this is just such a great question. And let me say, Irv, I have been where you've been, where you are. I know I can appreciate the challenges and the opportunities. But just to draw for just a moment on one of the things that Sandra just said about, how much goes into the conversation prior to the ask. I mean, first of all, you have to have the why. Why? I mean, the case, okay? And a strong case, and one that the board believes in. And let me say, coming off a recent experience, you absolutely must have your board. If you're about to do a major campaign, something that is more sustainable than, maybe it's a multi-year effort. Maybe most of your just year to year. So maybe the baby step or the likely next step is to begin to get your board comfortable with multi-year commitments. I don't know if that's your situation, but and you must have your board on board. I can't emphasize that enough. I've worked with a client recently who did not have that situation. And sometimes you need to see what it looks like when you don't have it to know how important it is. That's having your board on board, having the why, the case, the story, the impact that whatever this initiative is going to have will make possible. And then the what are the different components of it? I mean, I can't, I mean, I don't want to begin to think about what your components might be. But what are the what's that sort of, that are going to lead to this sort of next chapter? And then finally, at the end is the how, and the how is money. And, a donor of mine years ago said to me, just sort of as we were talking about his giving, he said, all that money facilitates passion. So, and I've never forgotten that, because money alone, I mean, that's not really what we're talking about here. I mean, and I think that's where people get stuck. I don't like to ask people for money, well, it's about investing in a mission. It's about tapping into somebody's passion, and then discovering, that how, first of all, what's their capacity? I mean, are they making a commitment year to year? Or is your organization something where they say to you, well, I want to make this possible forever? Okay, ding, 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 ding. And something that you even offer, or I want to make sure this exists long, again, depending on the person you're talking to, long after I'm living. Okay, now you say, okay, legacy gift sounds like bequest. So picking up on those little words and phrases, but again, to just underscore what Sandra said, it's just really, money is that concept. It's really just what makes it happen, and all the work that goes in before that. But I love this question because you heard me say it before, so say it again. Development is a team sport. And when you're a team, as you just said, or of 8 to 9 people, everybody, I don't know who's on your team, but let's say everybody from the receptionist to the director and the board, everybody plays a role. And one of the things I've done with other clients is very simple. I don't want to call it fundraising for dummies, but it's kind of a basic workshop. Pull back the curtain, demystify it. This is not something that is cooked up in a little cauldron over on the side. This is something that is an open fire. Everybody can participate. Everybody needs to participate. And as Sandra said, I mean, everybody isn't good at being an asker. Somebody once asked me about, sort of my philosophy, and I've seen it go awry. And, part of me wants to sort of refer to the old Greyhound bus, motto, leave the driving to us, leave the driving to the professionals, which is sort of like leave the asking to the professionals. But sometimes that question, and again, knowing who your talent is, accompanying a board member on a visit, that's another way of training and providing them with the tools and the resources that they need. But only a board member can turn to a potential donor and say, join me. And so you got to know, who do you pull in for that conversation, and are they comfortable in that regard? We talked about, how do you set people up for success? You want them to have wins, because nothing feels better than having a win, because then they're going to say, gee, that was really fun. That felt so gratifying. Is there somebody else you want me to go on and you? And, that's kind of what you're trying to foster. So, it's a great question. It's Sandra and I were looking at these questions ahead of time. I looked at that one and said, well, we could do a whole hour on that one.
Do you mind if I ask one follow-up question?
No, go ahead.
So there are some board members that would not be good askers, and maybe won't even do that role. They do lots of other work. They don't do that. What would be some optional roles that they could play in the effort that wouldn't be that, okay, they could do this, they could do this, they could do this. Can you give me some thoughts about that?
First of all, introductions. I mean, do they know other people who would be interested? Take money off the table. When you're, not talking about just want to get people who are interested. Okay, so can they make introductions? Could they host a small gathering? That old-fashioned concept of a parlor party, it still works. And kind of you know, is it a one table? Is it in somebody's living room, conference room, Zoom room, you know, that kind of thing. And Sandra said it before, I mean, there's nothing like being thanked. So, I mean, I don't think we do it enough, to be honest. And lately, Sandra, we should do a whole session on stewardship. Maybe
I
that's,
know.
but I've had conversations with all sorts of people over the last few months, and I don't know what's happened to the you know, to the thanking stewardship process. But it's just really important, and there's nothing like a personal thank you. Either, you know, somebody picks up the phone and just, you know, maybe they'll get a, probably they'll get a, you know, they'll get a voicemail or something because the recipient won't recognize the phone number, but they can leave a message. Just want to thank you. Your generosity means so much. Send them an email, send them a handwritten note.
Yeah.
You know, anything. I mean, that doesn't cost anything, and it's just, it's so valuable.
And it sparks areas of the brain for the folks who are doing the thinking. It's reminding them why they're doing what they're doing. It really is a great way to engage board members that feel a little nervous about this stuff, because they'll immediately feel successful. Nobody doesn't like to be thanked. Even if it's just a voicemail, they'll remind themselves why they're part of the organization. They have to find a way to say, here's what this means to me and to us, and they'll be kind of organizing themselves around how special your organization is and why they wanted to be a part of it. So I would say, no matter who the board member is, how reluctant they are to get involved, thinking, making phone calls, writing those handwritten notes, that is such a special thing. And that is just such a great way for everybody to participate.
Right. I think as well, Irv and others, you know, with us, you know, handwritten notes, it's just so, it's fascinating how our mode of communication, a handwritten note breaks through the clutter.
Yeah.
And I think we all struggle with, how do we get noticed? Well, a handwritten note is just unusual. I mean, a real handwritten note, not AI generated, but a real handwritten note with a real stamp. And
Stationary.
no.
Yeah, with all of that in mind, we had a question in the chat from Robert right along this a deeper dive into the theme of stewardship. And I know, Barbara, you were mentioning that we could have an hour plus on this topic specifically, but just as, you know, a short list or a snapshot, beyond that sort of personal note, Robert, I'd love to hear from you what challenges or successes you're finding, and then turn it over to Sandra and Barbara to elaborate a little bit further.
Thank you, Izzy. I'm Rob Danzig from Pratt. It's nice to meet you, and this is a terrific session. I don't have a lot of working with boards. I work with some of our board emeriti or have stepped off. But what comes back to me over and over again is just on the major donor level, making sure my donors are tended to well. And one example was that really sort of caught me in my tracks as a colleague was visiting one of the donors in my portfolio, and he did something really special, and I called to thank him. But she told me at the meeting he hadn't heard from me in a while. So it made me take a pause and say, on these special people, I really need to have either a formula or a process in place, whether it's from me or let's say they're doing something really special. I can thank them if they're in my portfolio, or kick it upstairs to the senior folks, or just engage folks, because I believe in the work that we do. You can't thank people enough. I think Barbara said that, or Sandra. And as long as it's sincere, it's meaningful. And I love the how, the why, the what, and the impact, because people have choices, and all the organizations here are valuable and reputable. But when someone does something valuable for you, you have to find a way to, as you say, Barbara, make it stand out, you know, get through the clutter. And that's what sort of I think about a lot. How do I give them a great experience so that they want to come back for more and more? so the people who are really engaged with us get value from that.
Yeah, great point, Robert. And I would build on that by saying, you know, I know I've had an experience where I've gotten to know a donor over time, and I've really gotten to know them. Okay. And I don't mean crossing a line. They're not my best friend or anything like that, because the relationship, you know, begins and ends with the institution or organization that basically brings you together. But where they're viewed, and this is another topic for another day, but I'm concerned sometimes when I sort of see the next generation of our profession and, you know, their ability to build those relationships that go beyond, you know, not go beyond, but really understand how this person ticks and what they care about. Okay. And, you know, and over the course of a conversation with a donor, you learn other things, other interests. I mean, you know, and so let's say there's something that you learn from a donor because you've been at this organization or institution for a long time, and you learn of a particular interest they have. You know, I mean, opera or thoroughbred racing, or, you know, what, I mean, I'm like a myriad of things, or travel to a certain point. I mean, I would pay attention to those things. And then, you know, I know in my, you know, in years past in my frontline career, you know, I would shoot somebody an email or, you know, pick up the phone and say, oh, you know, I heard that so-and-so was doing such and such, and I know this is something you really care about. If I'm the recipient, I mean, this is sort of what I've always said to my teams and to places I've consulted, put yourself in the shoes of that donor. Okay, I'm on the receiving end. Somebody, you, Robert, have called me. I haven't heard from you in a while. Oh, gee, Susie, I was thinking about you because I read about such and such in the New York Times, and it reminded me we hadn't been in touch in a while. Okay. And that, if I'm the donor, I'm thinking, wow, like, he really sort of gets me. I mean, I'm not just associated with that institution or that organization. I have all these other, and that, I mean, again, I mean, you're building a relationship, you know. So I think those are important things too to pay attention to. You know, people are not just one dimension in their relation to an organization.
No, I appreciate that, because I always want to get the relationship deep. And yet at the same time, what you say, Barbara, it's like I don't want to cross the line. I have to stay on this side, because
Right.
many times I give my people donor gift ideas, and then I tell them, I can't look at your portfolio. It's none of my business, but I'm going to ask you a lot of questions. But I have to stay here, and you have to go back to the folks that represent you.
Right.
So
It's,
I'm very mindful of that sort of
and this is,
professional friendship, however you want to define it.
it's an odd thing because you're asking them to open up. And if we are doing our jobs, we have to open up a certain amount in order to get. You gotta, I mean, that's an instinctive thing. You know, I don't know how you teach it. I think it is something you just have to have an EQ about how you relate to people. It's, you know, and I think over time it's something either you're effective at, or, you know, you have different levels of effectiveness and how
Well,
you.
one thing I wanted to share with the group in general, and you all know this, but it bears repeating. When I started in Plain Giving decades ago, I asked, what's the most important thing? And they said, listen.
Mm.
And so,
Mouth and 2 ears, use them proportionally.
Exactly. Robert, I wanted to, when you asked your question and, you know, you were reminded you hadn't been in touch with somebody for a while. I haven't been there. I'm sure everybody on this call has been there. It's really hard to juggle all of that and manage everything you have to do in your work. And I would say that there are so many project management tools that you can use now. If your CRM doesn't allow for a very robust kind of moves management setup, you know, Airtable or Asana, all of those project management tools are just really great for organizing this. And even though it might feel mechanical, I would say you could set up, say, whatever number makes sense, 5, 10, you know, touch points that you're going to commit to with each person on your portfolio. And that may mean inviting to an event. That may mean you know, that kind of organic thing that Barbara mentioned, where you've read something and you want to pass it on to them. But if you can just go through the list of your portfolio every month, every few weeks, and say, who haven't I touched base with? Is there anything I can send them? Is there good news from the organization? Do they have a birthday coming up? Just make sure you're kind of making those touch points. And it doesn't have to be like on the 30th of every month, because that's not going to feel right for you or for them. But just, you know, every so often when it feels right. And I think that practice of checking in on that for yourself will make you feel more comfortable that you're not, you know, you don't want to be in a position where you've asked somebody and you've thanked them, and the next time you're in touch with them is when you're asking again, you know, because that just doesn't feel good for anybody. So you just want to make sure you've got a few touch points in there, and using a project management tool to manage that for yourself might be a good way for you to do that. I certainly do that with, you know, our clients and potential clients, and it really works very, very well.
That's great to know, because I want to keep it organized better. So
Yeah.
I think, you know, summer is always a good time to kind of take that sort of step back and put everybody under the microscope and say, what do I want to say about this relationship a year from now?
Mm,
oh, I like that. That's good.
yeah. That's great. I love that. I want to do that with everybody in my life.
Everybody in your life. Yes.
Well, thank you both. This has been really instructive. Thank you.
Great. Well, great questions today. Wow. 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 I just knew this was going to be such an amazing conversation. And this is such a rich topic, Barbara. I do think we probably need a few more sessions on this. Because, you know, it's a challenging relationship between staff, consultants, leadership, and board members. You know, it can be very time consuming, and it can, you know, have a negative impact on your professional life, or it can have a very, very positive impact on your professional life. And it does take some planning and stewarding and managing. But I think, you know, if that's done right, I think, Barbara, you were saying the other day when we spoke earlier this week that you've had some really great experiences where the boards have been like firing on all cylinders, and it really, really is so joyful, but it takes work. And it takes attention. But I guess what I want to say is it is worth it. It'll pay off. Any work you do to cultivate those relationships and get them, you know, kind of marching in the same direction is going to be worth it.
Well, two things I would just, I mean, among others, I would add to that, you know, in the development profession, we use gardening.
Yes. Fishing, gardening.
Right. So, I mean, it requires tending. I mean, you know, you know, because Lord knows it can get full of weeds. But it does take tending, and it's just, it needs to be cleaned out, and you sort of need to step back and say, what do we need here? What are we missing? Maybe we have a board, just, you know, specifically as it relates to, you know, fundraising. Maybe we have a board of wonderfully connected people, but we need some people with money. I mean, okay, that's the other side of this. The board leads by example. And we need, you know, you need some percentage of your board. Maybe a board member in their sort of agreement is, you know, look, I don't have time, but I have money. And I'm happy to make a $100,000 gift every year. I'm making this up, of course, but I just, you know, I can come to board meetings, but this is going to be okay. Thank you. Thank you. Like that. Money's good, you know, as long as it's legally, you know, acquired. You're not trying to, you know, launder it through our organization. But money, you know, money's good too. And I think it's really understanding how, I mean, just like your donors, I mean, and presumably your board members are your donors, how each one ticks and what matters to them and what they're, you know, why they've decided. And, you know, I think you'll find out, are there board members who are, oh, I just want a board. I just want a board, you know, I want to be able to say I'm on a board. I mean, there's that as well. And one of the things I was going to suggest, Sandra, if we were to do something like this again, number one, it would be great to have some people who are not in the development profession, but truly are on a board, and they can talk about what that experience is from the other side. And I would also, and Sandra, you mentioned this the other day, I think if any of us are on boards, it's really incumbent upon us, and it's very interesting to play that other role. And so very instructive, I think, is to how, how we process that experience is, where does it fit? How does it measure up? What might we be doing differently in our own organizations that we've learned differently because of something that's not going well, or differently because something is going really well and functioning really, really well.
Yeah, it is really such a valuable role to play if your normal role is on staff. It really, I learned so much from being a board member elsewhere. So, okay, so we're running into 2 o'clock in a couple of minutes. So I want to wrap us up. As I'm running through a couple of things here, feel free to put your own takeaways into the chat from today's session. We will follow up with an email. We'll send the recording of the session today, and we'd love to keep in touch on social and an email. We'll share out when our next hot seat coaching session is shortly, all kinds of other things. So feel free to also check out our resources on our website, donorly.com, and through social, where all of our social handles are @_donorly. And Barbara, where can everybody find you?
On LinkedIn, BDG Consulting, or BD Gross Consulting, I think it is the connection on LinkedIn. Happy to chat, happy to engage otherwise. Wishing you all the best and good and end of fiscal years. If your fiscal year is June 30th, I know it'll be a busy time.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Barbara, for bringing your wisdom and enthusiasm to this conversation. I really appreciate it. I really appreciate you. I love every conversation I have with you. And it was just great to do this today. Thanks for everybody who participated and brought such great questions. I always enjoy these sessions so much. So hope to see you again for a future hot seat coaching session.
Thank you so much. Thank you all.
Take care.
Thank you.